Honestly, if you're anyone who's anyone watching what's happening in the UK, it's surprising to me people can't work out that this is true. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. I'll say it before, I'll say it again. From my time covering these protests, and if you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm someone who's covered a lot of different protests in Australia. I've been at the front line of riots. I've talked about all of these different things. I'm experienced. I've taken a few blows to do this. What is happening in the UK and Australia is not hypocrisy. These are not double standards. There's just a hierarchy that you're learning for the first time that you're plausibly at the bottom of. That there is no support or lobby group around you. No one is coming to save you because you didn't stand up for anyone else, probably. If I'm speaking to you right now, you're probably a white, middle-aged male who likely has never stood under someone else who looks like you. You've competed for position, you've competed for hierarchy with them, and you will refuse to stand under them and support them. Because that's been our society. Competition. The people who are rioting or counter-rioting in the UK are just learning to work this out in terms of group identity. If you want to know what they're necessarily working out or trying to work out, well, the Prime Minister won't explain what. It's a tragedy. They won't know what's happening. In case you're wondering, a young Rwandan kid, 17 years old, stabbed 9 kids in school. And if you're wondering what happened, it doesn't describe unrest, what led to the disinformation. Oh yes, a tragedy occurred, etc., etc. And when they do reveal who caused it, we have photos of the child when he's less than 10 years old, 8 or 9. And so we see the UK rioting and wondering what's happening, saying that this is unfair, etc., etc. But they're only just coming to terms with the fact that they have no support or kindness or people around them that can help them in these times. These are just some of the Islamic lobbying organizations in the UK. These are groups of people who know how to support one another. These are groups of people who will kneel and platform their own leaders and say, yes, we want you to rise to the top to represent our group interests. If you're watching this, likely your people don't. And that's what it seems that most of the UK is working out for the first time and throwing firebombs to try and get their message across. Yeah, that's not necessarily particularly useful. Violence is the final stage of when you consummate your power. After you've gone through all of the periods beforehand of creating influence groups, teaching, politicians in the right place, after you've created these hierarchies within your own people, that's when you demonstrate your force, a la BLM or others, and you use violence in order to consummate your goals, to prove your position in society, and then get the money, get the grants. And that's when you solidify your power. Longer term is the only one you can do that. Well, the riots right now are a lot of noise. I don't think they're going to achieve much. I think they're just going to get hundreds, if not thousands, of Brits locked up. Because people like you don't support you. This is a fairly significant man laughing at this other man who's ended up being injured in it. Tom here doesn't realise he looks like this guy. Tom here isn't like that other guy. Tom here is different. Tom here isn't like the other whites. Tom here is special because he's put in his bio something different. He's someone new. And probably you know plenty of people like that as well. Because it doesn't matter what you're seen as, it matters what you think you are. You're special. You're different. I've recognised and accepted going to protests. It doesn't matter if I go to them. It's like, I want to give you good coverage and be kind of... It matters how I'm immediately seen. Young white guy. My mum was brown. Would you believe that? Was brown. Grandpa was too. Plenty of brownness in my family, would you believe? It doesn't matter. It matters how I'm seen. Look, I'm white. I saw this when I used to live in the Middle East. I really recognised how white I was when I was there because that's how I was described. That's how I was seen. I didn't realise skin colour until you're amongst people who really notice it. And your skin colour is very noticeable. You can wave your flag around that, oh, you don't see colour. Great. Does colour see you? And that's what Tom and many others aren't seeing here either. Because For Tom and many like him, he hates whites. Most white liberals hate whites. They really, really do. I honestly, I kind of, I'm not a huge fan of whites either, because most of the whites were anywhere near inner cities where I live hate me because they hate whites too. So we all have one happy hate family. Great, fantastic. But the white liberals overwhelmingly dislike, and by some means hate, other whites. You might compare it to the queers of Palestine in that way, but yes, it's the out-group bias. The group here has a huge bias and support for people unlike them, even to the point where it supports states that would execute them. It's just how it is. You can say, oh, it's so funny. It is, accept it, move on. And the more liberal you are, it's more likely the richer you are. There's a clear bias between the two. More open-minded, inclusiveness, the more likely you are able to fit into large corporations, the more able to serve under people, and that's where you end up with a clear link where most millionaires that you meet probably don't spend a lot of time with any poor whites or anyone poor at all. They're more likely to network with other rich people in other rich cities. They commute more to Shanghai than they do Frankston, Mount Druitt. They know more people in their WhatsApp list from London, New York, and Dubai than they do from Penrith or Werribee or Ipswich. They don't know you. They don't want to know you. There's nothing they need from you. You do not produce the goods they need. You can offer them no economic opportunities. You will not work in their Bitcoin factories. They're not interested in you. If anything, from their point of view, you're only a potential drain for them. However, people from a very vastly different ethnic, religious, cultural context can offer them the very valuable platform for their potential investors. Getting rid of racism was thought to be a great thing, but if you're anywhere below the 50th percentile in income, it has merely freed your rich neighbors from having any loyalty to you or requirement to care for you. They have been liberated. You've been liberated too as well, but in a different way. Equality was thought to be a great thing, but equality is really just going to lead to you being made more equal with the rest of the world. That doesn't mean bringing 1 million new migrants a year up to your level. That means equalization with the other million migrants and where they came from. They will compete with you at the auction day and at the bid day for the job in terms of hourly rate. This wasn't always meant to be a great reward or opportunity for you. It's just how it worked out. And your white liberal friends who have a higher IQ than you, earn more than you, and are more likely to work in media than you, who hate you, will write the articles which describe appalling scenes, awful, who won't describe the specifics of what exactly happened, who will write press releases for the Prime Minister, call it unimaginable pain. For what? What happened? Who was stabbed and how? And who did it? Nope, you don't need to talk about that. Okay, then we just move on. Because the lobby groups, if this were anyone else, will make sure that that doesn't happen. Look at the sheer list of this. You don't have the white vote lobby group, and that's your fault. That's you. This is not isn't this a terrible situation? Oh, no, this isn't that extreme at all. This isn't that extreme at all. This is the way things are. You probably, most of the people, if you're watching anything like this, supporting yes, get rid of the two-tier system. Okay, are you going to create a anti-two-tier lobby group or what have you? Probably not. Most viewers like this will say, oh, isn't it terrible, and move on. You're unlikely to form a sensible political power-broken group like the Muslim vote and do that. Closest might be Patriotic Alternative, which is you kind of have your hikes. It's constantly trying to kick Nazis out of it. Does a bit of stickering. This isn't real lobby. This isn't lobbying. These guys aren't lobbying. It's just not. Reform UK, colourblind, whatever. Kind of Homeland Party, again, constantly trying to keep the Nazis out and just isn't like it runs on like a $20 budget. This isn't. The closest you've kind of got in the UK is Turning Point, and same here in Australia, Turning Point Australia. But something I can point out about it is the leader of the closest you have to a lobby group like it is led by a Syrian. A Syrian is more likely to care for, if you care about the UK, if you're taking the UK riots close to you, a Syrian is more interested in your ethnic, cultural, religious interests than you are, and dedicate himself and put more time in, as I'm sure you have plenty of complaints of Joel, but care more about your issues than anything else. And plausibly, some of you would even criticize him, as many others do, an anti-white conning grifter, when I would say Turning Point and Joel Jamal, you could have lots of complaints about, that's not the point, has done the work to try and lobby for it. You can criticize how he's done it, blah, 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 but he has. Turning Point has done a lot. Outcomes, not YouTube's. Here he is with Elijah Schaffer defending his position. He went on his show and continues to lobby for white interests, white values, white culture, despite, by many views, not necessarily being white himself and Arab. I think that is less a reflection of, Joel was trying to steal either. No, it's actually a reflection more on that no one in the white community has stepped forward into it, that he's been able to achieve more than anyone else has in that way. And I think that is up to that group of people to consider that. Not a criticism of Pauline Hanson or her wearing the Jewish scarf here, but an example of that this is not laser focused. Pauline isn't that laser focus on, again, what many of the rioters in the UK seem to be so upset about. Pauline's more of a broad church, and by involving in that conflict, you're no longer purely focused on that kind of isolationist, nationalist, that kind of borderish view. So you go beyond that. You become more internationalist in that way. But One Nation probably isn't that either. So that's where I come back to British Australian community. But guys, I got to point out, it's like 4 guys. Like, this is not, they put out some beautiful content, check it out. But this is a really tiny lobby group. And this isn't, yes, they might be there one day, but right now, this is the closest you got, which is that kind of very small target, single point, only interested in these issues, which kind of overlap with the UK. And I hold this up again as a great example of a lack of, there is no white, Euro, Christian, whatever you want to say that the rioters about the UK are at, their lobby group doesn't exist. And I put that firmly on their people who who are so obsessed with the idea of competition and hierarchy that and privilege. Because if the white privilege is anything, I would say that the white privilege is entitlement. Is that they expect the continued privilege and inheritance of Empire, Identity Australia, 1960s, 70s, whatever you want to try and put that, is theirs to just be granted. Well, no, it's not. It's earned, and every generation needs to earn it, and you're not, because you're just expecting it to land in your lap. So you lose. This is what losing looks like. When one group can parade the streets with weapons outwardly, and police tell them that they can do so without any, they are not as strictly policed as one another. That's not a two-tier culture. That's you haven't done the work to lobby for your own political interests, and you're constantly One Nation style, leaving MPs, voting on principle. I'm going to do things my own way. I've got to do this. Individual, me, century of the self, etc., etc. So this is just the natural kind of result of that. So yeah, British, like maybe is the closest that you get. What comes next? So we've gone through, for any period of time that you look at, it cannot be too simply, we didn't just end up with, as so many Jack Tuohys may hope for, and say, oh, why can't we just go back to the 1970s? The 1970s occurred because of every decade that happened before it, like playing from a sheet of music. You cannot get to that end note, ding, without every note that came before it. You cannot have the 1970s without the 1960s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, and everything that led up to that. You cannot go back to the early 2000s if that's your favorite period there. You cannot go back there without every decade that came before that, in that order, in that way. There's no reverse gear, only forward. So to play forward for what the Anglosphere has ahead of it in the next 10 years, again, if you may disassociate yourself with the Anglosphere, it's not about what you believe, think, or feel, it's how you're seen. I just came back from the eastern suburbs this evening, and most people over there would say, oh, but I'm not that kind of white or whatever, some individual branding. No, you'll be judged as one, probably. Same with Christians. Even if you don't believe in Christianity, you'll be seen as someone who is, and judged accordingly. When you complain about not having a house because you can't afford a house. No, people like you can't. That's not that you, James or Jane, can't afford a house. No, people like you. Your group cannot. What happens next? Ever heard of the Boxer Rebellion? I tell this story a few times whenever things about China come up. Early 1900s, China has been just a piece of pie for the taking, really, for about 100 years. China, pizza, Europe, it was like a pie to be cut up by all the different powers. Here's a good one. Let's get that one. There you go. China's richest regarded its poorest as resources to be auctioned off for opium. If you don't know, there was an enormous opium epidemic throughout China for really 100 years. And no one really cared. Their leaders didn't care. They were happy to allow the British, Dutch, or anyone else to sell opium into it, and they were so obsessed with brokering their own power and deciding what the Qing... By the way, you might think that the Qing is a slur. No, that's literally what the Qing dynasty was called. That's why people were called Qings with it. It was the Qing dynasty. That they didn't care. Same as the Indians before it were so primed for it, is that the Indian princes were more than happy to allow the British to come and heap chests of silver upon them in order to sell out their own nations and principality. And for over 100 years, Europeans carved up different chunks of China for their own different territories. So you'd have a European quarter, a German quarter, there's a German flag, a Spanish flag. They'd have their own ethnic areas within different parts of China. And people would live, and they'd have their own police forces, and they lived greatly privileged lives segregated from the rest. You're watching 55 Days at Peking. This is what comes next. Is what comes next. We already have individual police forces. We already have different cultures. Different areas within your cities and countries will look like this, policed by their own people who they can trust to police them. Look at hiring practices. Only people of their own kind, BIPOC, Aboriginal, what have you. Your group, your rich, are unaccountable to you. They have convinced you that you have no loyalty to them, and they no loyalty to you, and nor do you. Other groups don't feel that way. The imams and clerics here fiercely feel they have responsibility both ways, by the people that lead them and reverse. And more power to them. They win. Good on them. This is your, probably, if you care about these UK protests, as you probably do, this is your people's failures, because you probably have not held your relations that you may point to accountable as well. This is a bilateral deal where the people at the top are accountable to the bottom, and vice versa. You would call it socialism, if you want, ethno-socialism, if you like. And they're winning and you're not. They hold loyalty to people like them. They have a great in-group bias towards them, and you don't, for whatever reasons that we can get into another time. Your intellectual, philosophical, political elite, which tend to be liberal, outward-looking, after we've looked at that for 100 plus years, go back to the 1830s, and your elite decided to wage a war to free slaves of different people. A very good and virtuous thing. Great, fantastic. It manifests it in different ways. You can go into the cultural Marxism thing and all that. Look, bottom line is, you are likely such an adherent of not just free market capitalism, but also social free market capitalism, that you are unwilling to kneel beneath someone else and see someone else succeed ahead of you. You're so obsessed with competition. Looks a lot like American streets, doesn't it? Except at least it's off the streets a little bit. That's what comes next. I got sick and tired of browsing Twitter of what was happening there and going, why? People are like, why is this a two-tier system? Yeah, they know. You probably let it happen. You're not willing to hold people similar to it accountable. There you go. Yep. Yeah, kind of. Plenty of protests over there. You search for UK and you get all kinds of things. Yes, it is. Not as bad as BLM. Not as bad as BLM. But nowhere near as bad. But the media will look like it. I think one of the ones that I was surprised by would be the COVID lockdown suggestions. The suggestion that the UK needs a COVID-style lockdown, calls for a COVID-style lockdown response to Islamic migrants hunting. Oh, okay. Oh, he's saying the other way. To calls for a and this hunting non-Muslim peaceful. Look, whether he's saying that we need to have a COVID-style lockdown to protect whites or protect Muslims, don't know. There have been several suggestions by people from the House of Lords to have a COVID-style lockdown. I don't know if that byline is necessarily correct, but a government advisory on political violence, and if he were part of this government, I'd suggest that it's one way or the other. But yes, it is on fire, and you can look forward to a COVID-style lockdown in the near future if these riots and protests continue. I'm not Anglo, and you find yourself defending Anglos more than Anglos. It's bizarre. Yep. Yeah. Thanks for pointing out that point which I brought up, which is one of the leading lobby groups in Australia for Anglo interests is Syrian. I'm sure there are more. I don't mean just to put him on a pedestal above all others. I put him forward as an excellent example of a non-Anglo person representing Anglo issues more than most any other Anglo I can think of. Right? You can choose to put Joel Davis forward in that way, but now we go down I'm not afraid to say the more NatSoc, that kind of path, the more saluting, which the lobbying, not hiling. I don't believe hiles are going to be something that any government, any corporation, any university will look at and say, yeah, we need some hiles to really support our student base, our voter base. It's just not. Lobbying is trying to appeal to the centre. Heck, try to appeal to the right. Right? You need something broader, more sensible, and something that you can walk into someone's office, an MP's office, and say, we represent a larger, wider community. And I don't think you can do that with a HH 1488. I don't think that's going to be something that's going to resonate there. This is the thing. Jared Taylor gets thrown in with HH 1488. I think he's an excellent example of group interest in trying to do that. Let's read it. What is your thought on Gerald Taylor quote from his 1990 book, Paved with Good Intentions? Yeah, it was. White consciousness, never entirely absent, now lies dangerously like a coiled spring that could lash out with sudden and surprising strength. 1992, 2024. Yep. How's that working out? If the what's happening in the UK is sudden and surprising strength, this isn't. I don't think this is strength. Again, violence is the consummation of lobbying, corporate, university, lobbying the generals in many different protests. Have they got any generals on side yet? I remember when Trump had his. We had the January 6th. I was woken up and I was like, hey, there's something happening. There's a coup in the United States. And I'm like, have any generals on swap sides have done anything? Nope. Oh, I'm going back to sleep. Doesn't matter. Unless he gets the generals. His generals are so far offside, Trump wasn't going to be able to achieve anything there. Coiled spring, potential energy. Have these Anglo-white consciousness, have they secured any type of preserves of influence or power? Nope. Again, I went through it and I've got maybe the British Australian community. That's it. Australian natives. Someone raised to me somewhere. No, don't know. Not active. Not holding events. Not serious. Not serious. And you don't need to be huge to be serious, but you're not doing anything. What you're seeing here, this isn't serious political lobbying. This is yobbery. This is what you do after you consummate all of the other preserves of power to demonstrate that you have that power. Okay, you're doing it to show that you're angry. Good job. How many times have the UK exploded into white racial anger only for it to splat up against a wall? It doesn't achieve anything. It is used to demonstrate power, to flex and go, oh, our people are angry, you'd better do something. What, you got Tommy Robinson? Okay. Tommy represents a lot of different issues, and I'll just say that he represents a lot of different issues, and I come back to it's got to be laser focused for your lobbying. Yep, great, love Pauline Hanson, go for that, anti-immigration, etc., etc. But she's broad. Who is the very narrow, just one issue lobbyist there, and who's going to stand under that? Will you volunteer your time for that particular issue? Will you help someone like that out? Will you put someone as the CEO of this organization and see them succeed ahead of you, earning $50,000 a year just as part of that lobbying group? Or will you go and leak all of the shit you ever found from every private chat room in order to bring that other guy down because he wouldn't pull you with him? Because that's what happens with so much of how many different One Nation, Burston, Fraser Anning, like the number of One Nation MPs that just end up spilling and knifing each other in the back on the way out. Oh. This is. I just wanted to come on and really explain half an hour. Perhaps aiming for 20 minutes. I hope that helps some. If you're anything like me, you may have been seeing people. If you're anything like me, you're trying to understand why this is happening, why the UK is angry, why you're going to have one group of people who are going to no, this is probably fake, this statement. Why you end up with one group of people carrying knives, large, foot-long knives in these streets, while you have unarmed individuals. Set something on fire here. No central command or leadership figure. Just working class natives that look. No, this is the failure, and this will just spin around in latent, useless, boxer-style rebellions. Because what did the Chinese end up getting worried with? See these guys? Oh God, ads. Sorry guys, you want to ad? You want to watch Motion Array? What did the Boxers end up having when they did try and storm the castle where all the Europeans had to flee to? There was no unified command of the Boxers. Dowager Empress and what have you. They weren't telling. She didn't want them to go in because the Europeans would bring in crates of silver, which was great for her lifestyle and the people that she needed to pay off to stay in her position of power. The Dowager Empress needed them, or else she was going to get knifed. By the end of it, she didn't really care. She was so high on opium, it didn't matter. Same thing here. These nationalist Chinese flinging themselves up against a wall with the same thing. No centralized command. They just knew. They saw their men being killed in the streets, the coolies, their women being taken and beaten. They just saw, and who on the inside as well did they tend to get to man their guns? It was the same. Chinese would also work for the Europeans and shoot their fellow country, ethnic, religious men in order to get paid by the Europeans, who had crates and crates and crates of silver and a large monarchical structured system. 11 nations went into China in this battle, of which is one of the first battles that Australians ever served under an Australian flag, because it was after Federation. This is one of the first battles of Australia that you're ever seeing here. Can you believe that? Boxer Rebellion. Can you believe that? That's what happens next. That's what happens next. At least that's my take anyway. There won't be. There is no one day some group will have enough. We could have said in the 1860s with the Dowager, far beyond the Dowager Empress, right? And with her, but she was the handmaiden of her, not her father, but her former husband of sorts. We could have said that 50 years earlier, that eventually the Chinese will have enough and rise up against them. No. This can continue for decades, maybe even centuries. There is no special Rubicon to be passed. This will continue until it is stopped. There are a few groups that can stop this. People with money, your Jenny Reinhardts, your Kerry Stokes of sorts, but you'll need your kind of top 1%. You'll need good 10% of the national kind of wealth to do something about this. It can be done politically, but that doesn't hold as much power as your kind of main asset holder class. And you can form political groups that move this, but if Trump is any indication of this, it's harder than it used to be because control of the propaganda is a lot harder. Most of these news networks are quite far-reaching, your TikTok class, and it's just not that organized. Is there a Rubicon that is going to be passed? No. This rolling boulder, this will continue until someone or something stops it. And when it does, it needs to be an unstoppable force, meaning an immovable object, kind of. This would need to be huge. And Trump is kind of the closest you get to this. In Europe, you've seen some impact, but don't forget your Maloney's fail. Even your five-star movements, they get dissolved away. It's amazing what the allure of a multi-million-dollar beach house can do to shift your opinion. Look at Greece. They wanted to pull out of the euro, and Syriza was elected on that platform to pull out of the euro. And then they had a referendum which said pull out of the euro, and they still didn't do it. You're asking for something really big. Ultimately, it kind of starts with you. When does the Rubicon stop? If you can join a small organization and make a small impact on whatever small interest that you have without asking to be paid back, as I put forward, Antifa does particularly well. Most socialist alliance, communist groups do particularly well. They don't expect returns, and they have made remarkably effective gains. When you or someone you know joins an organization that does that without any expectation of direct personal return, as long as you're part of an expectation, part of a group that isn't getting a return as well, then maybe that Rubicon changes, but it doesn't. This will continue until something changes. It's that kind of rule of physics. Boulder will keep going until something changes its course. Does that help anyone? I hope that helps understand something of what is happening, what you're going through, why this is what it is. Rare knowledge, I think. Most everyone just wants to be outraged that it's a two-tier system. Oh no. But what about my people? Okay, are you going to help out your people? If that's what most people are sending maps about in the UK. I wouldn't call this a black pill. I'd call it more just a grey pill. It just is. You can like it just is, and until I think a lot of people just don't recognise it. Red pill, you don't recognise it for what it is. Two-tier system. No, Keir is not accountable to you in the UK. Albanese is not accountable to you here in Australia. You have no lobby group representing you. You're just a vast melange of like nothingness. When they say white people have no culture, they're right. You don't have a lobby group representing your culture. You don't have spokespeople for your culture. White people have no culture. That's changing. You're seeing some Twitter influences, but yeah, it's kind of changing. Bronze Age pervert? I don't know. But most of the people who represent your culture aren't from your ethnic, cultural, or religious background. They tend to be non-white. So then we come back to Georgia Mom. No, it's Mr. Bonds. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of people in every civilization that are naturally socialist. That's true. They're uncomfortable with competition. Yep. They want to enjoy living with other people labour. They want to accept people who want to accept their sexual lifestyles. Yeah. Well, in this case of the UK protest, what I'm actually bringing up is actually quite the opposite. In an economy, a protected economy, you can have that kind of competition. In what the people of the UK are protesting over, it's what they're taking issue is what they see a two-tier ethnic, cultural, religious police force, which competition will not solve. One of the great studies I saw is that the most productive hens and roosters within a chicken farm produce wonderfully, but need to be culled because they bring down the productivity of the rest of the farm entirely. Competition in its way. For group interests, competition reduces group interests. Again, you come back to the individual succeed, the group fails, the group succeeds, the individual. That trade-off. For the group to succeed, an individual must suffer to lift the rest of it up. When an individual succeeds, it tends to come with the cost of the support of the group. For this interest that we're looking at here, of what the Brits are so upset about, where again, knife-wielding groups are able to patrol that. Competition will not create a lobby group in the same way that these vast list of Islamic organisations who were successful. The British Islamic Medical Association does not succeed because they compete within themselves for who is in it. They might have another one like it, but it is about a group interest far beyond what the individual is. The Federation of Islamic Students, Islamic Societies, People Justice Party, Policy, Progressive British Muslims, all of these, while they may compete within one another, they lobby for a group goal. They don't compete with each other and expect that return. All of these organisations have vast volunteer bases, donor bases, and they're accountable to one another. So within... I know exactly what you mean about socialism. There's also a reason it doesn't exist outside most kind of West. I mean, it doesn't really exist outside most Western European countries. Tends to be around homogenous societies that kind of exists. But we're not in that kind of space any longer. Yep, they are collective groups, and they succeed very well in a Western civilization that values that individual freedom. These collective Muslim Vote Matters groups can thrive in that free and individual society where there exist very few. You go back 30 years and you're not going to find the Italian vote, the white vote, and we're not going to see that in the near future. These thrive in a multicultural tossed salad which we're now entering into. We've gone past the melting pot stage. The melting pot failed, and we're entering into a Dubai-like tossed salad. When I lived in Dubai, what everyone talked about was a tossed salad. We're not there to melt within each other. No. Now we're entering a space that most Muslim, Islamic influence groups in Australia talk about a tossed salad. So we're not doing that anymore. It's old-fashioned. You will be a tomato, and I will be an onion, and never the twain will meet. We'll have our own different parts of this multicultural tossed salad. Except we have citizenship, unlike the others. Yes, de Tocqueville. That's a good point. Tocqueville. What they learnt, and they were much closer to. What they were much closer to was the French Revolution. There was a reason why, not long after they created the United States of America, that they limited democracy. They limited it because the French Revolution saw one of the finest democracies there are. Ended with a guillotine. It's chaotic. It atomizes people. It must be limited, like all things, in some way. So they were able to learn from the mistakes of it, as we will here from what's happening in the UK. What happens next in 3 months' time when we see the American election? Do we see a repeat of this? And the answer is absolutely, no matter really who wins. Neither side will be happy because we're just too goddamn diverse. We hate each other too much. We really do. The Chinese ruling class hated their poorer classes. The Indian ruling classes hated their poorer classes and were willing to, and they were more likely to love outsiders more than they were their own neighbours, and willing to take their money. It was better for them. They were happy with it. Bit of it can change. It's not going to change straight away. Nothing about it is going to change until we go through this process and go, we're not going to do that again. There's a reason why the Chinese are so anti-atomization. They had their 50 million dead from their Taiping uprising. They're going, we aren't splitting into again. We're not going to have cultish religions. So that was the landing of Christianity, a huge civil war. We're not going to let the Europeans buy us out. Division is death. We are going to be one China, and we will, with a long march, slaughter millions of our own if we need to stay unified, because the alternative is even millions more dead. That's one way to do it. Kill a million so you don't have to kill 2 million. Yeah, Chinese logic. Let's not get to that. I don't think we're going to get to that. But until there are identity lobby groups that can provide a democratic counterweight to all of the ones that other exist, the lobby groups will succeed. Collectives will succeed over individual competition in the political arena. That's just how politics work. Individuals have morality. Groups are just sheer physical force. Let me remind you, when you're in a mob like this, no one cares that you don't see color. No one cares that you're not a fan of racism or whatever. No one cares. They look at you, you're white. They look at you, and the same thing here. They look at you, you're brown. That's what it's like in a group battle, protest, mob situation. There is no time for dialogue about what you believe and your political idea and your Black Lives Matter pidge or your Union Jack. No one cares. It's just sheer physical force. I guess that's my views on why that is. Hope that helped you interpret some more of why this is happening. Be safe. Talk to one another. Collectivize. Whatever that group might be. Find compromises. That'd be a good idea. All right.